Well, this is next to the last week of Pentecost. And so we change seasons, the liturgical seasons, and what I do when we change seasons is to change everything, to focus on what the purpose, what the intent, what the meaning of that season is. And so the seasons were developed long ago in the very, very early church. And the seasons were designed to help the people to understand the life of Christ. So they begin with Advent, which is the heralding of the coming Messiah, of the coming of Christ, the Christ child. And then we have Christmas, the birth of the child. And then we have Epiphany, the growing awareness of the child coming into his own. And then we move into and his teachings and his ministry, what it was all about. And then we move into Lent, which is the moving toward Easter, or the crucifixion, his Via Dolorosa, his road to the cross. And then Easter, or Holy Week, which is the crucifixion of Christ, and then Holy Week, which is the resurrection, and the whole reason that we even have a church and a faith. And then we move into Pentecost, which is that Christ has risen and appointed the apostles to move out and to carry the good news into the world. And then we receive that same commission to continue that message. And then in the early 1900s, the first 6 months of the year are all of the seasons except Pentecost. And then Pentecost is 6 months long, because the church has been here a whole lot longer than that short 33-year period of the Messiah with us. So that makes this the Pentecost season longer, 6 months. Well, that was a little long. And in the early mid-1900s, the Methodist Church said, we're focusing on the message of the good news, to be in relationship with God. That's our purpose, that's our calling, that we are to be in relationship with our Creator. But Jesus went further than that. Jesus first told us that we need to. All the prophets told us that we need to be in relationship with God. And then Jesus told us how. Well, if it was important enough for Jesus to teach this constantly, then it's important enough for us to keep teaching it again. Okay, this is what we're supposed to do. Now, how do you do that? And so they created the season of Kingdom Tide, or if you inclusify it, Dominion Tide, which I feel is important that we follow and that we practice. It kind of went away a little bit, and then other denominations started to take note. That actually is not a bad idea. Wow. They may have something there. And so other denominations have come on board. And it's not widespread across liturgical churches, but getting more and more and more use and notoriety. So Pentecost then, which is 26 weeks long, is now split into two 13-week seasons. Pentecost, the birth of the church, and then Dominion Tide, how we are to be and grow in our relationship with God. So we're coming up to that. We've got one more week of Pentecost, and then we move into Dominion Tide. And you're going to see a lot of changes. Changes that point to what the season is telling us, what the season is meant to show us. So for Pentecost, Pentecost was all about, so beforehand you had Jesus teaching the disciples and then sending out the apostles among the world. That it was no longer led by Jesus, but now it's the apostles teaching people to start and lead churches in their communities all over the world. So I changed the way we did things. So now it's no longer about me. It's not about the leader standing up in front and doing everything. It's about us doing it and pulling together. It's about us working together. It's about seeing the choir leading people. It's not about me doing communion, because I'm not the only one. There's nothing special about me doing communion at all. The only thing that makes me special as pastor is that I've learned how to run the organization of a church. But as far as doing God's work in the service, there's nothing special. So, we have lay people leading us in communion. We have the choir showing us that we're all called to lead. We're all called to help one another. We're all called to be in this together. And that's a really good message for us to see. Not just hear, but to see every single week. And that will continue into Dominion Tide. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to rise above our human nature. So as base creatures, biological creatures, we start out with our most urgent needs that need to be met first. First is food and water. If you don't have food and water, everything else doesn't matter. If you don't have food and water, you're not going to make it to the brand new house. The brand new house doesn't matter anymore. That has to be met first. Then, shelter. And then we move on and we move on and we move on. And it's human nature also that we get used to things and then we want things a little bit better. We're hardwired that way. We're supposed to do that because that's how we grow as a civilization. We all pull together and we look for something better. We don't just settle for sitting in the mud puddle by the fire eating whatever the kill was for the day. We rise to something better. Okay, the cave is fine, but it's a little damp and it's a little wet and it's just yucky and there's all kinds of spiders and creatures and bats in here with us, and can't we do something better? And we did. And somebody sees it and says, oh, that's really nice. Well, I like that, but could we do even better? And we grow and we grow and we grow and we grow. Remember when everybody had a telephone in the house? And they all kind of looked the same, and they were just, it was just a basic functioning appliance. And then all of a sudden, we got these. First, it just flipped open. Well, actually, it didn't even flip open at first, and it gave us our phone calls. And then one of the companies realized that, we've got this thing, why not add Tetris to it? Ooh, ooh. And we're all playing Tetris. Oh, isn't this wonderful? Isn't this glorious and fun? And now they are computer systems. And the phone is kind of a extra. And everybody has to have the latest version of what this pocket-sized computer will do. Kids, it's not just enough to have shoes. You have to have sneakers, but then you have to have the right kind of sneaker. and the right sneaker with the right laces, and on and on and on it goes, and we just get out of control. And we miss sight of what we all started with. And our faith began with the very basic questions that we asked when we sat around the campfire with eating the day's kill. Where did we come from? Which naturally leads to, where are we going? And then the next one is, what am I here for? And we ponder those questions. And faith came about to answer those questions. And God started speaking to us, and God started helping us to understand those very basic questions that we all ask. Now, billions of years later, that we all ask. Every single one of us who's born starts with those questions. And for us, obviously the answer to what are we doing here then is to prepare ourselves for where we are going. God has helped us with the answers of where did we come from, where are we going, and how do we prepare ourselves. Jesus told us how to prepare ourselves, and that's what we're going to be focusing on for the next 14 weeks. And it's an interesting point. How do we prepare ourselves? So there's a story about an ancient king who presented his court jester with a beautiful wand. I give you this trophy, said the king, to symbolize your status as the greatest fool in my kingdom. You are to keep it until you can give it to a greater fool than yourself. And the court jester good-naturedly accepted the award. And sometime later, the king was dying and asked to see his court jester. I wanted to say goodbye, he said. I'm going on a long journey that will last forever. And the jester then asked, well, what have you done to prepare yourself for this great trip? Nothing whatsoever, the king replied. Since I don't know exactly what to expect from this long journey, there's nothing to be done to prepare myself. To which the jester replied, then take this wand. You are the biggest fool of all. Obviously, the point is that the point of life, this gift, this precious gift that we have been given, is to prepare ourselves for the next step. We know where we came from. We know because we're here. We've read the book. We've read the roadmap. We have the atlas in front of us. We know where we're headed. And we even know how to prepare ourselves for that final day. And it's very simple. It's very simple. To love the Lord your God with all of your heart, your mind, and your soul, and equally as important, neck and neck, to love your neighbor. That's how you do it. That doesn't mean that you don't have to come for the next 13 weeks, because that's the answer. Every single week, that's the answer. To love your neighbor. Jesus didn't tell us exactly what to expect when we journey into eternity. But he did give us an exact definition of eternal life. In his prayer to God at the Last Supper, he he prayed, Abba, the hour has come. Glorify your child. Let him give eternal life to all those you have entrusted to him. And eternal life is this, to know you, the only true God. That's it. It's real simple. It's real hard to practice it. But it's beautifully simple. And we get so caught up. We have that base instinct, that base survival instinct that served us well when we had to find food and water and shelter. But it starts to get in the way when you're trying to grow as a person, when you're focused on me. It's just all about me. And it's not. What it's about is hearing that your friends are trying to do something wonderful, but they're so cramped it's really hard to do. And to say, they need a bigger area to be in. I can do something about that. I can help them out. I can change that. And I'm going to do it. Not even thinking about what that's going to mean physically and the effort it's going to take. What doesn't matter? Because it just doesn't matter. They need it. I'm going to help. And a couple people hearing about it and saying, we'll do whatever we can to help you. Whatever you need, we're here. Because we're all in this together. Because we get it. Because we understand what this life is all about. And it's about pulling together. It's about being community. It's about loving your neighbor. And doing whatever it takes to show that love. To let that love flow through each and every one of us. About pulling together. We start, you saw in the Old Testament lesson this morning, we start by being delivered from slavery, from bondage, and being shown a way out into the desert to find survival. And the people had been told all along what they needed to do to prepare themselves for what was coming. They didn't know what was coming, but they were told how to prepare. Well, food didn't last, and so things became kind of crucial, and people started grumbling against Aaron and Moses and saying, you know what? We had it better back there in slavery. At least we were getting fed every single day. God said, I hear you. I hear you. And so, God gave us the very basic staple of life. Okay, you need to eat, and you're having trouble getting enough for yourselves. Okay, so every morning go out, and you'll find as much bread as you need. Bread to keep you alive. They also got quail in the evenings, so they got some meat too, but the basic staple, the bread of life, the basic necessity was given to them. But then they started to complain. Oh, bread again, bread again, bread again. What about some rye bread? What about some pumpernickel? What about some whole wheat? Come on now. I mean, this is just getting boring. We're hardwired to try to make things better. So, Jesus and the disciples have gone out. Jesus sent the disciples out 2 by 2 to go from village to village to village to share the good news, to cure people, to chase out demons, and to share the good news of our Creator. He's teaching them, he's training them, he's preparing them for when he leaves. This is what they're going to do, and they're going to train people to do that as well, and then to establish churches, a new term, a new understanding of faith, a faith that is open to all. And so the disciples come back, they meet with Jesus, and they tell him of all the victories that they had. And they're exhausted. They've been walking all over the place. They're exhausted. They're pretty well spent. They've been teaching. They've been leading. They've been chasing out demons. They're pretty well done in. Jesus says, you know what? Tell you what. Let's get in a boat, go across, because there's so many people here needing attention. Let's go across to the other side, because you need to rest. And then we can be more effective in ministry. So we'll go across the lake. They get over there, everybody watches them coming, and all of a sudden they're all there. Here we are. We have needs. And even though Jesus was helping the disciples to meet their physical needs of rest, the people come first. Loving your neighbor comes first. Let's go a little bit more, and then you can rest. And they feed over 14,000 people with just a couple loaves of bread, the bread of life, and a few fish, and have all sorts of leftovers. When they're done, Jesus says, okay, I need to get you guys out of this crowd. You guys need rest. Let's go across the other side of the lake. They go over, crowds follow, run around the lake to meet them, and then people from all over that area gather, and all of a sudden there's this huge crowd. And they're saying, well, you know, we see these signs. I mean, he just fed 14,000 people with a couple of loaves of bread and a couple of fish. We see these miraculous signs, so you must be the one. But show us some more. Show us some more so we know. We haven't changed at all. It's our own human nature. And Jesus calls us on it. He says, you're here because I fed you, and you want more food. And he says, no. And he takes up that old saying. He practices that old saying. Give a hungry person a fish and you feed them today. Teach them how to fish and you fed them for life. Jesus says, you're coming for a free meal. I'm going to give you something greater. You come to me looking for bread. I'm going to give you the bread that lasts. I'm going to give you the bread of life. I am the basic staple, the basic thing you can't live without, that you need for your survival when you're going to the next step. And I don't know if they all really got it. A lot of them did. And the message is there for us today as well. Do you want to get to the end and have someone hand you the wand when you say, well, I didn't know really where I was going, so I didn't know how to prepare. Well, here you go. You're the greatest fool of all. The wisest of all center their hope for the good life on the food that endures to eternal life. The love of God is revealed in the person of Jesus Christ, our bread of life. In John's Gospel, the unique Greek word that speaks of eternal life actually means life plus. The word that says eternal life is life plus. Not just mere existence, not just inhaling and exhaling, not just minimum daily requirements, not just meandering around, but life plus. Life plus the divine spark. Life plus our individual and unique relationship with God, our Creator. And that's what we need to be focused on every day of every week for the rest of our lives. And that's what we'll be moving into in Dominion Tide. We'll be focused on and learning Jesus' lessons on how to take in the bread of life and to be in relationship with God. Amen.